Hey, welcome back. I'm pretty blown away by how many people we had listening to the last week's podcast, audio, visual thing, whatever. It was like over 5,000 people, which, I'm pretty blown away by. So thank you if you're listening to this on your way to work or you're watching it from your phone or computer or Spotify or iTunes, because it's nice just to do all this kind of informal stuff and chat about anything that's happening or any kind of thoughts, and it's long form content. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's not going to be like video stuff, because the idea of this is it's an audio channel. And I had some comments on the YouTube video last week that I need video and stuff, but that's not the idea of this. I've got a channel called Rob Rides e-mtb, which is like all video stuff, and that's the one that will have all the content on, all the video content on anyway. Whereas this one is going to be like audio, so it's just me talking crap for 15 minutes, half hour, an hour, or however. And I like it because it's really raw. There's no like editing. It's just talking stuff about bikes and e-bikes and that kind of stuff. So hope you enjoy it. The response has been pretty cool so far, so I'm going to keep doing them every week, and eventually I want to get some like guests on and that kind of stuff. That'd be really, really cool. But this week I want to talk a little bit about bikes and consumer electronics, because they're starting to become, or they're turning into, slowly, mechanical devices that also contain consumer electronics, right? If you look at a bike now versus 100 years ago, like 100 years ago, a bike was two wheels, a frame, and a chain that makes you go, right? And pretty much 10 years ago, fundamentally they were the same. Okay, yet the components have changed. There's now suspension, really good, like loads of stuff's progressed, but fundamentally it's been your own leg power that's propelled you along, by you sitting on a frame made out of carbon or steel or aluminium, and you've had two wheels and you've used your own kind of power to go. Now e-bikes are now turning into, I believe, pieces of consumer electronics that now come with all the complexities that consumer electronics do come with. So if you imagine like a phone, right? An iPhone, for example. When that iPhone breaks down, you've got a way of getting it fixed. Now that might be going back to where you bought it from or sending it away, and through time, the manufacturers have learned that you got to get that shit fixed quick to keep that consumer happy, because if that manufacturer doesn't look after you, another manufacturer will. They'll find out a way of getting it sorted. Now, if you think about going back to that bike thing, when we were talking about bikes being or turning into consumer electronics devices, then they're not. They're still fundamentally bicycles with a motor, but we're getting there, right? If you look at a bike now, an e-bike, it has a motor, an electronic motor in it, which, by the way, originally the Turbo Levo, I think the first turbo e-bike that Specialized did, had a Bros motor, and it came from the motor actually was an evolution, or no, I think it was the this is funny, it's the power steering motor from an Audi A8, right? So that power steering motor has evolved into an e-bike motor. So anyway, an e-bike now will come with a battery that comprises many cells inside it, and a BMS, which is like the controller of the battery to make sure it's safe and it's not going to blow up. And then you've got the motor itself and the wiring harness to link all of that together, and a display in many cases. Many e-bikes have displays on, not all, but many of them do. And then you've got to link it all together, the software. And that's really, really important, because that dictates when you put a revolution through the pedal, depending on how much torque you put through, that will apply a certain amount of power through the drivetrain to propel you forward. So we're still really in the early stages of e-bikes. Yet they've been around for a number of years now, but they're progressing at a rapid pace. I think that the frame designers and bike engineers are now working out ways of getting proper bike geometry into e-bikes, which is really, really cool. But I think we've still got quite a long way to go to get these e-bikes reliable and give the users or the consumers confidence that they're buying a product that is going to last and is also going to be easy to fix if shit goes wrong, right? Because going back to, well, anything that you buy pretty much now, if there's an issue with it, you can get it fixed fairly quickly and fairly easily, right? So if I've bought, I don't know, this is a battery, it's a portable battery, I bought it from Amazon. If it goes wrong, I just go online, click return, and Amazon will take it back, and I can even send it to them for free. I don't even need to pay for postage. Or 14-day return, or if I've bought something from John Lewis, which is a retailer in the UK, really good. If something goes wrong, you just go back and they'll swap it out. We're at the stage with bicycles that it's not as easy as that in many situations. In some situations it is, but in many situations it's not. And I guess it all starts from the point of manufacturer and someone selling us an e-bike. So what we've got the manufacturers, right? So Specialized, Trek, Giant, Highbike, all of the bike manufacturers, Focus. And what they do is they distribute their bikes into various different locations around the world, and you'll pretty much traditionally go to a bike shop and buy that bike. Now, the law, or certainly the law in the UK, is that the retailer actually has the responsibility to fix something if it goes wrong, or they need to provide a guarantee that it's going to last a certain length of time. And without getting to the whole complexities of warranties and all that kind of stuff and legally where do we stand, I can touch on it briefly. Before I started this e-bike stuff full time, I worked for Apple as a senior manager in their in like the service side for retail. So I had to do part of that, to do that job, understand the consumer law and how it all worked. Anyway, the manufacturer, the responsibility of the manufacturer pretty much lies to the place that they sold it to, and your responsibility or your consumer rights are linked to the place of purchase. So if I buy a bike from Rob's Bikes online and within the first few months it fails, that retailer has to put it right, and that's their responsibility, not mine or not Brose's or whoever. It's the place that you bought it from. It starts to change after 6 months. There's something called a reverse burden of proof, and this is where everyone gets confused, me included, with warranty and this 5-year EU thing or 6-year, and it's a bit of a stupid law, because essentially there's a reverse burden of proof that transfers onto the consumer, and it means that after 6 months, let's say my bike that I bought from Rob's Bikes fails, I actually need to prove to that retailer that it was that fault existed at time of purchase. Anyway, many manufacturers or retailers have warranties that exceed these and just make it easier for consumers. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, at the moment we're in a situation where, depending on where you buy the bike from, you get different levels of service and different levels of aftercare. And what's happening at the moment, or what I'm seeing, is you buy a bike online and it will come with a particular motor. what I'm seeing is people buying stuff and the motor itself failing or a wiring part failing, and almost like places not absolving themselves of any responsibility, but saying, oh, you need to go there to get that sorted. And that's rubbish, man. That it shouldn't work like that. You don't buy a car and then you don't go to the garage because it stopped working and them saying, oh, you need to go back to Bros because your windscreen motor's failed. That doesn't work like that. Or they don't say, oh, you need to go to a Bosch service centre to get your power steering fixed. The place that sold it to you takes full responsibility and gets that shit sorted for you, right? And that's kind of how it should work in the bike industry, I believe, anyway. So I think we've got a long way to go, because electrical parts in bicycles, especially parts that are fundamental to the way it works, i.e. a motor, is if it stops working, it's crap, man, isn't it? It's like we spend thousands of pounds on these bikes. They cost between £500 and £15,000, and they're being used in our leisure time. And our leisure time it's golden, isn't it? You know, you work and then you've got time that you spend with friends and family, and then we've got this leisure time that this is like the most sacred time, right? And you want to do what you want to do, whether it's watch something, listen to something, go out for a walk, run, bike. You do not want your £5,000 electric bicycle to not work, right? So when that happens, all right, I get it. Shit happens, things go wrong. You then need to get it fixed. So let's say you bought your bike from Rob's Bikes. You then need to work out how to get it back to me. You box it up, you wait for a courier to come and collect it. I then look at it and say, well, actually, no, this is Rob's Motors. You know, there's an issue with this. We're going to need to send it away, and you're going to need to wait for it to be fixed. And I don't know what the solution is, but it's the way things are working at the moment. In many cases, they're really, really good. But I think that there's going to be a number of cases that we're going to see over the next year, or many examples of where people have bought something or bought a bike and it's not worked, and they've had to send it back, and they're getting frustrated because they're without their bike for a long time. So I think fundamentally, right, there's a chain of different parties within this. There's the manufacturer of the bike. So let's say Specialized, High Bike, Focus, Grape, whoever. Ultimately, they're making a product. They're assembling this product from lots of different manufacturers across the world and selling it to a retailer in most cases, and then a retailer sells it to us. I think the number one thing is that the bike manufacturers need to really learn quickly about what the failure points on these bikes are, and liaise with the motor manufacturers, the wiring manufacturers, the software writers, and get this stuff sorted out as soon as possible. Because we're in the infancy, we're kind of early adopters, but we're paying a lot of money to be early adopters, right? We're paying thousands of pounds. So I think that's the first thing. Like, motor manufacturers and bike manufacturers need to come together, and I'm sure they do. You know, we only see what we see. We don't see all the stuff that's happening behind closed doors. But there's no one really that I'm seeing that's going out there and saying, yeah, we recognise there's an issue, this is what we're going to go and do, and being open and honest about it. And then I think the next part lies with the motor manufacturers, just to make stuff that lasts, right? Or have a better infrastructure for fixing things when things go wrong, or just having a load of spares and sending them to the bike shops so they've got something that they can swap out there and then, or same day when something goes wrong. And then there's the retailers, like at the end of the chain. I'm really lucky. I live close to Berkshire Cycles, who are a a phenomenal bike retailer, great team, and I've been banging on about them since I bought my bike from them last year. But if something goes wrong, they not only do they have the expertise to fix it, right? They do it pretty much while you wait. Now, in stark contrast to that, I went cycling with a guy last year, and it was his maiden voyage on his Turbo Levo. So we met up at Swinley. He'd bought this bike from probably the UK's biggest bicycle retailer. So you can probably narrow it down. And it was a Turbo Levo. Anyway, we're in Swinley Forest, and we went out for a ride, and I'm like, I'm going to whack in turbo, just burn around and hit some of the blue trails. And he was like, he was blowing away. He was like sweating. Didn't look like he was having a good time. So I was like, "Oh, you all right, dude?" Steve, his name was. And he was like, "Yeah, I just, it's his first e-bike, right? I just thought it would give me more help than this." I'm like, "Okay, well, maybe put it into turbo," and then we carried on riding. Anyway, we got to the end of like a 10-minute few trail ride, and he was like, he was absolutely dripping with sweat, and he was like, it's good, but it's not really giving me that much assistance. Anyway, I got on it, and it was not giving any power at all. It wasn't even turned on. I mean, I think it said it was turned on the bike, it did, but there was no power going through to the motor at all. So Steve, fair play, man, you were keeping up with us on an e-bike that weighed 24 kilograms without it even being turned on. You legend. So anyway, on the side of the trail, we tried to work out what it was, and we failed basically. So he called up the retailer that he bought it from. Remember, one of the biggest retailers in the UK for bikes and bike parts and accessories. So he speaks to the guy there, and I think he spoke to the manager. And the manager goes, Neil's not in until like next week. And Neil was like the e-bike expert. Can you please call back next Wednesday? So he's bought a $5,000 bike. It doesn't work, and he has to wait until next Wednesday till the one dude knows how to even start troubleshooting this bike. So, you can imagine his frustration and just how deflated that you would feel after you've saved up mega bucks. You've taken time out of your precious golden time, which is your time out that you get from work and family, and your bike just doesn't even work, right? It sucks, doesn't it? Absolutely sucks. And that's probably an extreme example, but there are many, many examples that I am reading about of bikes that are failing, or they're not getting the kind of backup that they should be getting from the place that they bought it from. There's a guy that bought a bike with a motor, new motor that's just come out quite recently, imported it from Germany, didn't work, retailer doesn't really want to know, not returning any emails. Anyway, this is not to name and shame, because that's not the purpose of this. This is just to recognise that there's a bit of a fundamental paradigm shift in the bicycle industry that needs to happen quite soon, because they're no longer just mechanical components with two wheels, a frame and a chain. They are now basically pieces of... They contain consumer electronics and parts that are evolving, and that we're discovering that they're prone to failure, and that failure leads to pretty much catastrophic failure in many cases, where you can't fix it, or you can't use it, right? So in the past, if a brake or chain or your derailleur fails, you can pretty much order it online and just fix it yourself. It's quite cheap. You can order a new mech, you can order a new cassette, you can order a new chain, a new tyre, a new wheel, and you can fix it yourself at home. And as long as you've got a reasonable amount of skill, you can repair it. Or if you don't feel confident doing it, you can take it to pretty much any bike shop and they'll have the skill to be able to fix that. But now with bikes, you can't. With e-bikes, sorry, you can't. So if your motor fails or a cable fails or whatever else, you're going to need to work out what to do. And it's difficult, isn't it? Like, I've just got the 2020 Canevo and I had it since the 3rd of October and already the wiring part inside has failed. So I had to take it back to Berkshire Cycles. They knew instantly what it was and they're like, yeah. And it was caused by water damage. So arguably that is my fault that it's got wet, but we're sold these bikes on the premise that they can be used outside and you shouldn't have to worry about riding through a puddle or riding in rain. Should you? Really? I don't think. I think that the bikes are advertised as mountain bikes that are going to shuttle you to the top of the hill and you're going to be able to smash it back down. And you can, but as soon as they start getting wet, they don't like that and they're not sealed. And I think there's a huge amount of work that needs to happen between the manufacturers of the bike, so the bike companies, the manufacturers of the OEM, the equipment, so the batteries, the motors, the wiring, the controls, the displays, all of that, and the retailers to bring all of this together. So when something breaks, as a consumer, you can get the service that you expect, right? Because the expectation is if you're spending $5,000 on a bike and something goes wrong, the expectation is the same as what it is if you're spending £100 on a computer monitor or a phone or a microwave, really, isn't it? At the end of the day, you just want to get it fixed as soon as possible. So if we go back to like the motoring analogy, car dealers now, most main dealers now are pretty good. You can reasonably expect something to be booked in, a part ordered and collected and fixed quite quickly. And most of the most of the car dealers now have all the tools and the expertise to be able to diagnose and fix something. That is not the case in the biking industry, in the bicycle industry. And I think that, the people that get on board really, really quickly with this kind of stuff are the guys that are going to have a really, really great business in the future. Because it's not good enough now to be able to refer a customer to somebody else or not be able to fix it if you sold it to them. And what I'm seeing is the people that are getting behind this quickly and are investing the time and energy into learning how to fix broken e-bikes. These are the guys that are going to be really, really successful, right? So I've already mentioned Berkshire Cycles, I know Raceco, I know Donskeen Cycles. They're the names that I'm hearing that are really, really great at identifying what the problem is and fixing it same day and giving great service. And at the same time, I'm hearing of many, many retailers that are selling a very, very expensive bike and then not washing their hands of it, but not being able to, or not having the expertise to be able to fix it when shit goes wrong. And I think a lot of that is down to them just not knowing, really. I don't think there's any intent there to not help people. If you imagine if you've got a bike shop and you've owned a bike shop for 50 years and that bike shop is really focused on sales and mechanical service, right? So when a chain breaks or when a tire breaks, all that kind of, we'll call it spanner in work, right? But then a bike comes in that now needs like a firmware update or a software update or to be diagnosed with a machine or needs some wiring installed. Like, it's a totally different ball game, isn't it? So if you've not experienced any of that before, you need to start learning quite quickly. And I do think that the bike brands probably need to help the retailers as quickly as possible. And because the bike brands are selling these bikes as packages, like, you want to know that they're going to be able to fix it as well. So going back to the car thing, like, you don't go back to your car dealer and they don't say, oh, you need to, it's a bros issue, your power steering motor's failed, it's a bros thing, you know, you're going to need to go to a bros service centre or a Shimano service centre or Bosch service centre. No, you don't even think of it like that. You just think, I've got a Audi or whatever car it is, it's an Audi problem. And I think that's where we need to get to with bikes. I think that you're buying a branded bike and they should take care of pretty much everything, and all that crap around whose part it is really shouldn't be our problem, because that's not what we're buying into. We're buying an assembled product from a bike brand and they're selling it to us and advertising it to us as a bike that can be chucked down a mountain, used on the Mega Avalanche, Rampage, you know, cross country, downhill, whatever. So yeah, sorry for the rant, but I'm seeing many people that are contacting me that are disappointed that they've bought something and they're not being looked after. And I worked in a business that had some fundamental rules, and one of them was, and it always sticks with me, it's, if we don't look after the customer, someone else will. And that's the case, right? It only takes one bad experience for someone to say, screw you, I'm never going to buy that bike again, or I'm never going to go into your shop again. So, you know, we've got an opportunity now where e-bikes have been out they're really getting popular, certainly in the UK, only over the past couple of years. In Europe, a little bit more. In the US, it's still, you know, picking up momentum, but it's still not quite as popular. So stuff needs to happen quite quickly. And I think that will start helping consumer confidence, and it will start to help people not fear, but not buy a bike brand because they're worried about what happens if something goes wrong. And that should be a small factor in your buying decision, right? You know, it's important, but it shouldn't be the number one thing. And a lot of consumers are making this their number one priority at the moment. Where shall I buy it from? Because if it goes wrong, I want it to be fixed. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. And I do hope we get to a time when if you get a problem, you can go in and you can get it fixed as quickly as possible and not have to be without your bike for 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks, and not have to chase people left, right and centre to get it fixed. And for companies not to blame each other that it's not our issue, it's that motor manufacturer because that was in our bike. And it just shouldn't work like that, should it? They shouldn't say, well, it's a Shimano, so, you know, you'll have to speak to them. We sold it to you, but, you know, we don't know how to fix it. That's not how it should be. Anyway, off the back of this, what I did is I on my Patreon asked some folks for some questions to send it to some bike brands. So I've sent them to 5 different bike brands. I've had a few responses already, which is really cool. And it's mainly around like longevity of bikes, how long should we expect them to last, what different care do we need to take, what's the issue with the motors at the moment, because many people are experiencing them go wrong. And there's one around like battery recycling, because if you think like the batteries that we're getting are massive, what happens to that in 5 years' time? Can we trade it up? And like you can in many places. So hopefully it'll get some response, and I'll be able to share that with you in next week's podcast or next week's video cast, whatever you want to call it, and however you listen to it. Huge thanks for staying with me. What are your thoughts on this? Like, let me know in the comments around your experiences, or where you think we need to get to with consumer confidence for e-bikes, because it is still early, right? Really, isn't it? It's still early doors, and everyone's learning, right? No one has the solution, and it requires a lot of people to work together. But what are your recommendations? Like, what do you want to see? Do you want to see like 5-year warranties or 10-year warranties, lifetime warranties? What do you think we should be getting in exchange for thousands of pounds that we're giving up? Cool. I will catch up with you soon. Thanks for tuning in. Check out the high bike fly on video that I just did on YouTube, and the Kenevo video, the Kenevo podcast that I did just before this one as well. And I will catch up with you all soon. See ya.